Past participles are super important in French. In today's video, I will show you what they are and how to form them. Okay, so let's have a look at past participle. In French, we call it le participe passé. So what is it? It is a verb form used in compound tenses, such as le passé composé. Have a look at this example. I have played, j'ai joué. The past participle here is played. But look at le plus que parfait. Okay, le plus que parfait is I had played. Here in French is j'avais joué. The past participle remains the same, joué. And le futur antérieur, I will have played, j'aurais joué. Here again, the past participle is exactly the same. So, it is similar to the English past participle. For example, I have played would be I will have played, will be the same, finished and so on. I think you may think, well, Alexa, well, played is the past tense. Okay, let me put it this way. Have a look at the verb to eat in English, okay? Just forget about French for a minute. You're looking at to eat. To eat here is in its infinitive form. Put it into the past tense becomes I ate, okay, A-T-E. However, put it in a compound tense using the auxiliary avoir in this case, to have, I have eaten. You see what we've done? We have transformed to eat into its past participle form, which is eaten. And this is what a past participle is. It's not quite the infinitive, it's not quite the past tense, it's the verb that has been transformed because we're using an auxiliary, okay, a compound tense, just like the ones I've named earlier on. We've got many more in French. So just like in English, the past participle is combined with an auxiliary verb, okay? It's just happened that we have to avoir and être, to have and to be. And we need those auxiliary in order to form the compound tenses I'm talking about. So it's quite simple. To form a compound tense in French, you're going to need, of course, your subject, your auxiliary verb with, in however tense we need. It can be I have, I had, I will have, I would have. But then what remains the same is the past participle. So how do we form the past participle? And this is the most difficult part in some ways. We've got three groups of verbs in French. The first group is called the regular verbs. You know, all these verbs in French that end in er at the end in their infinitive form are regular verbs. So how do we form a verb ending in er into its past participle form? All you need to do is this. You replace er with an e with an accent, aigu, aigu. Example, parler becomes parler. It's the same pronunciation, but the spelling is different. So parler, just with an e with accent, is the past participle of parler. Okay, so it's basically to speak, spoken, to talk, talked. For example, j'ai parlé à mon ami. I have spoken to my friend. Can you see the parler? Can you see the past participle? And we can only use this spelling because we're using the auxiliary avoir just before that. Okay, let's have a look at the second group regular verbs now. The verbs that ends with IR in its infinitive form. Now they're quite regular, which means that the past participle will follow the same pattern of how we form the past participle. So, in a past participle with a verb of the second group with IR, you drop IR and you put an I, or you drop the R. Finir, for example, which is to finish, becomes fini in its past participle form. To finish becomes finished. For example, nous avons fini nos devoirs. We finished our homework. Or we have finished our homework. Now, Let's have a look at the last group of verbs. This is called les verbes du troisième groupe, or the third group verbs, and they are highly irregular. Now, third group verbs are irregular and their past participle, unfortunately, must be memorized, okay? Why is that? Because they don't follow one single pattern. Unlike the ER verb, where you have just an E with an accent aigu, or the IR verb, where you have just an I in the past participle, irregular verbs do not follow this pattern. And I'm going to show you a list to show you that, oh, okay, I need to know this by heart. For example, let's take prendre as an example, to take. Now, the past participle of prendre in English is taken. I have taken, okay? You don't say I have took, yeah? The same works in French in some ways. You don't say elle a prendre. You've got to transform that verb into its past participle. Well, prendre is pris, okay? So we would say elle a pris le bus ce matin. She took the bus this morning, or she has taken the bus this morning. I've put together a very useful list of irregular past participles for you here, so please have a look at them, memorize them. But if you want further study on the use of the past participle, for example, in the Passé composé, please have a look at my lesson 15 of my very popular Complete French course. Right, here's the list. For the verb avoir, to have, the past participle is eu. So in a sentence, j'ai eu, I have had. See that? Être, to be, is été. J'ai été, I have been. Faire, to do or to make, is fait. J'ai fait, I have made or have done. Mettre is me. So I've put me. Prendre is to take. J'ai pris, I have taken. Voir, and that's a funny one, is vu. I have seen, j'ai vu. Lire is to read, is lu. J'ai lu, I have read. Dire is to say, is dit. J'ai dit, I have said. Écrire, to write, is écrit. J'ai écrit, I have written. Pouvoir is to be able to. J'ai pu, I was able to. Pouvoir is pu, that's quite an irregular verb, which I cover in other lessons. Vouloir is to want. J'ai voulu, I have wanted, I wanted. Devoir, to have to, is dû. J'ai dû. Do you see how irregular those verbs are? I had to. Boire is to drink. J'ai bu, I have drunk. Très bien, j'ai bu. Connaître, j'ai connu, I have known. Okay, connaître, connu. Savoir, to know, again, j'ai su. I've known, I found out. For example, venir, the past participle is venu, to come. I have come. Naître is to be born. Né, je suis né. I was born. And mourir is to die. The past participle is mort. Je suis mort. I am dead. Just one thing I would like to point out, you may have seen in that list of highly irregular past participles IR verbs. Now, I did say that the second groups were IR verbs, but sometimes, unfortunately, we have IR verbs that belong to the third group verbs. And, unfortunately, they do not follow the same pattern as the second group verbs. Did you follow me? Well, anyway. Another thing you will need to know, which is really useful, is that it's about the agreement of the past participle with the verb être. Now, when using a compound tense like the passé composé, it can be formed, like I said earlier on, with the auxiliary avoir or être, okay? Now, when using the auxiliary être, to be, the past participle must agree in gender and number with the subject of the verb. Now, before I show you what I mean, you may wonder, but which verbs uses être in the passé composé or in any compound tense? Well, there are two sorts of verbs. The first sort is the reflexive verbs, okay, the verbs with the se. For example, se laver, to wash oneself, s'habiller, to get dressed. These verbs take être as the auxiliary and follow the same rules as I'm about to give you, okay? So that's one category. The second category of verbs that use the auxiliary verb to be are the ones indicating movement or change of state. They use être in the compound tense. Now, this is another lesson, but a good way to remember them, the movement verb, is with the acronym Dr. and Mrs. Van der Trump. Please see the support guide attached with this lesson for the full list of the verbs, the movement verbs used with être in the passé composé or any compound tenses. And again, I cover in great detail the movement verbs and the reflexive verbs in my course. So if you want to check it out, follow the link under this video. Okay, so how does it work? Do you remember? Lost you, maybe? But how does it work? The past participle has to agree in gender and number with its subject. What does that mean? I think the best way is for me to give you an example. In French, you've got to take in consideration 4 things, okay? Is your subject masculine? Is your subject feminine? Is your subject masculine plural? Is your subject feminine plural? Now let's take, for example, partir as an example. So it means to leave. Weirdly, partir ends with IR, okay? IR. It's part of the movement verbs. So when conjugating it in the compound tense, we are going to use to be as the auxiliary. And this is where it's very important because I said we needed to agree, you know, the past participle with the subject we are using because we are using être. So, what happens when we're using il, for example, a masculine singular pronoun? Il est parti. It means he has left or he left, okay? So the subject, il, is masculine and singular. So, there is no change. We are just leaving this as it is. So, parti just has an I. Now, what happens if we're using a feminine singular subject, such as elle, she? Elle est partie. She left or she has left, okay? Again, we are using être because partir is a movement verb. Here, the subject elle is feminine. So we add an I to the past participle. So what happens when we use masculine plural pronouns? Ils sont partis. They left. See what happens here? The subject il is masculine plural, so we add an S to parti. Not an I, it's not feminine, an S because it's masculine plural. So now you can see the difference when we use a feminine plural pronoun. Elles sont parties. So what have we done? The subject elle is feminine, but plural as well. So we add an I to reflect the feminine and an S to reflect the plural. Now remember, you only have to agree in gender and number your past participle to your pronoun when the auxiliary verb is être, not avoir. Okay, here's a quick recap. The past participle is essential for forming compound tenses like the passé composé, the plus que parfait, the passé antérieur, etc., etc. There are 3 main groups, the ER group with the E accent as a past participle, the IR group with just an I as a past participle, and then you've got the highly irregular verbs such as prendre becomes pris, boire becomes bu. Some verbs use être as the auxiliary, mostly verbs of movement and reflexive verbs, and always check agreement with the subject when the auxiliary is être. And we've covered examples about that. Now, why don't you have a look at this video here on avoir and être in the passé composé and which one should you use? It's a really popular video, so have a go, have a look at them. Hit there, the video. That's it for me. Au revoir, à bientôt. Bisous, bisous.